Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. I'm Andrew Greaves and I'm joined by Chris Borden and Darren Bentley. So the Clarets continued their pre-season preparations with a 1-0 defeat to Stoke City on Saturday. Very bizarre game. We'll get into that. Sending off, which you very rarely see. Lots of yellow cards, which you very rarely see in a friendly. And a bit of a weird side, really. Kind of a strong-ish starting 11, albeit without a striker, and then a bench full of kids. Perhaps something to do with the late dropping out of Sheffield Wednesday from a training ground game and everything with that. Also going to discuss the signing of Broja from Chelsea, which looks to be pretty much on the cards and done and dusted according to those in the know. And then we'll touch upon as friendly next week against Lazio, which will be a world first because if you're that way inclined and you've got a £300 to £400 Meta headset, you can also watch computer graphics of that game as though you're there at Turf Moor, but we'll come on to that as well. Let's just start with Stoke City 1, Burnley 0. Daz, I mean, we were chatting before we came on air about pre-season. You know, it counts for nothing, does it, really, results-wise? A bit of a flat performance from the Clarets. A goal we conceded, probably one that new signing Max Weiss will not want to see again. How important is a 1-0 defeat at Stoke City in the grand scheme of things 2 weeks out from that opener at Spurs?
Forgot it by 5:10 on Saturday, Scott. That's how important it is. They're completely irrelevant. I know some fans get their knickers in a twist about defeats and how form goes in pre-season, but and we've said this before, they are little more than vehicles to get players fit for the big tasks ahead. And for that reason, one of my big bugbears, friendlies just playing behind closed doors. Fans don't need to see them because all it does is you end up seeing a player running at 50, 60% capacity. You end up with a bunch of kids, you end up substitutions galore. There's no reflection whatsoever of a real game. So just playing behind closed doors until you perhaps have your showpiece friendly, as in next week's. But I can't get to friendlies. Sending players off in a friendly, that's a new one on me. I know you watched the game, Andrew, so you probably have a starting point on me on that one. But it bears no resemblance whatsoever to how Burnley will line up, probably next week and certainly when the season starts.
Yeah, and Chris, I mean, Daz touched on the sending off there. I mean, as he said, you know, they're no resemblance of a real game, but our referee Steve Martin, I'm not joking, that is what the referee is called, not he of only murderers in the apartment block,
funnier.
whatever it's called.
Yeah, he's funnier than the referee.
Yeah. It just felt. I don't know if you saw it as well. I know you were looking at going at one point, and so was I up until about Saturday morning. I was tempted to drive down and then thought I'd get a £5 Clarets Plus pass to watch. But
you bloody lunatics!
You
honestly.
Can't really ever tell anything. I know, honestly. This is what you're desperate for football, aren't you? I mean, I've been watching Celtic. I've been watching Cardiff yesterday as well, but. Chris, I mean, it doesn't bear any resemblance, does it? I mean, are you worried that the players looked at 50, 60%?
Well, we've seen every possible combination of I've seen Burnley losing at Southport. We've seen them lose to Isle of Man. We've seen them beating Premier League teams when they were in second division, and vice versa. It's just like I say, it's a glorified training session. I do think, I mean, they seem to be edging more and more behind closed doors until the sort of closing weeks. But they're even the very last one now. You might get an indication of what the starting 11 is going to be at Spurs, but the main thing is just you're praying you avoid injuries, aren't you? And just getting that fitness under the belt. They started getting ruined. You're going back sort of 20, 25 years ago when teams were making 11 subs at half time and you were just, teams with like 8 and 9 trialists in and you couldn't name them and things like that. But you're talking about the sending off. I mean, thankfully, there's no. I mean, I believe Laurent has to miss the behind closed doors friendly at Gawthorpe on Saturday, and can play. I mean, what it's just ludicrous, isn't it? If we cast our minds back, I'm going back to when Steve Cottrell was in charge, and Kyle Lafferty ended up having a bit of a bit of a set two in one of the games I think was it in Austria or over the border in Germany? I can't remember which one of the two, but he got sent off, and we were sort of pulled by Steve Cottrell after the game, and he said, "I don't want any mention of this because they didn't want Kyle Lafferty suspended for the opening 3 games of the season." And we were guests of the club in essence, in that we'd travelled with them and we were in their accommodation, and you sort of like people had seen it. It puts you in a real pickle of a situation. Some Burnley fans have seen him get sent off, but you also don't want the lad to be suspended for the first 3 games for an absolute nonsense situation. But and he ended up missing the first 3 games, didn't he, Kyle? And it was no, I mean
I refer you to
it's
my first point.
pre-season.
I refer you to my first point.
Well,
Playing behind closed doors.
but they're for everyone, aren't they? They're for players to get attuned to the new season. They're for referees to get attuned to the new season. And from my experience, even for journalists, you're getting back into the swing of covering 90 minutes again, and the sort of little things that you do during games, etc. But the referee, I mean, why you can't just go to a bench and say, "Hey, come on, can we calm him down? Or do you want to take him off?" Or it's beyond a joke that. But I'm not remotely concerned that they've lost to a very Stoke-like goal, to a very, it's a very sort of Burnley-like goal in the past that he would concede at Stoke, isn't it? But as I say, the goalkeeper's not covered himself in glory. But the only worry is, I mean, again, you're playing without a recognised centre forward. Where are the chances and goals coming from? You like to see a sort of a procession of those, really, don't you?
Yeah, we'll come on to Broja because he looks like the kind of next incoming, if you will. Obviously, a striker. Had a great spell at Southampton. Has had a couple of injuries, not quite lit things up. But we'll come on to Armando Broja in a second. But Daz, I mean, the lineup, as I say, felt a little bit strange, perhaps as a result of Sheffield Wednesday cancelling their appearance at the Burnley training centre quite late. Do you think the fact that we played without a recognised striker, which it seems madness really, because there were several opportunities where we got into final third and it was a bit like, oh shit, we don't really know what to do because there's nobody in the middle. Do you think that is probably, that's the team we'd worked with all week? The bench was very young. I think there was a couple of lads, certainly one lad I think didn't turn 17 until today, I think it was. Is that a consequence of, packing that bench with youngsters because Scott Parker wanted to play a Burnley 11 versus Burnley 11 at the training ground on Saturday morning, and he was kind of forced to change his bench a little bit, perhaps even forced to drop one of his strikers that he may have played at Stoke because he wanted that game in the morning to be, be worthwhile rather than just having first team versus kids?
It lends credence to my belief that managers just want these friendlies to get the players out there and get some time in the legs, and whether you've got a striker on the pitch this early in the season, I know we're only 2 weeks out, do you need a striker on the pitch? Because they want game time. That's what they want. So the fact they probably had a game in the morning, and we're not exactly over endowed with strikers, by the way, at the minute. So the last thing you want is a striker probably going to Stoke, which is probably one of the more competitive friendlies you're going to get, and picking up a knock. So put 11 men out there, get a bit of time in the legs. It doesn't really matter if you get beat 1-0. These games are all about the managers. I mean, from a managerial point of view, I get it. You want to get your team out there. You want a bit of shape, perhaps. You want to see a bit of interaction and a bit of chemistry developing between players, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So, yeah, I wouldn't read anything to the fact we'd no striker up front. I don't think at this stage it's sending a message to the board that we need a striker. It's all about getting game time in the legs, and most managers these days want to try and equate that game time and level it out amongst the players so they all get an equal amount. Certainly Sean did that, and I know before that probably Eddie did it as well. So you want everyone to have an equal amount of sort of game time so you've got that baseline to work from across the board. So don't read anything into it. That would be my reading.
Yeah, and
Having
Chris,
said that,
Scott,
we need Broja in the door quick.
Yeah. You kind of think. I mean, you touched on it, kind of. That last friendly, that set piece friendly, is the one where you perhaps see a resemblance of what a side might look like. Chris, I mean, do you expect a different approach against Lazio? I mean, obviously, I think Lazio probably have an extra week before their first Serie A game. So we're going to be a bit like Stoke, a week ahead of them. For us, it's probably going to be the last, well, it's definitely going to be the last public friendly. I think Scott Parker alluded to maybe trying to squeeze another friendly in. Do you see next week as the big week where we perhaps get that goalkeeper we're looking at in? Broja gets done. I think he's passed the first part of his medical from the reports we've seen. Do you think that Scott Parker will almost have that as a bit of a mini deadline in terms of, look, if we can get as many of the targets through the door, I can at least have 2 weeks to work with them before Spurs? Or are you again expecting, nothing more than an exhibition match with, subs aplenty on 65 minutes?
Yeah, the latter. I don't think we're in that position that you can set deadlines for it. I think we've seen, is it Amorim wanted so many signings through the door by the beginning of July, and United have had a miserable window, and you're seeing it across the piece now. Where like I said, Newcastle have had this bizarre situation all summer where they were lording it over everyone. Thought they were going to bring Trafford in, and they were going to bring Ekitike in and play with Isak, and then all of a sudden Liverpool have gazumped them, and it, it looks like they'll now have the money to bid for Isak because is it what the PIF they're going to sign Nunes, aren't they? For it's just crazy, and the whole thing again. We'll be waiting right until 11 o'clock and midnight, whatever it is this year, because the rules have no doubt changed again on deadline day, and we're in this farcical situation every year where the season starts and nobody has a clue what your squad's going to be, what your first 11's going to be, until really the window closes, and the window has to close before the season starts. And we need to have some sort. I know you can't have it unilaterally, across, but we have these situations where, I mean, surely we can have some sort of blanket, within a couple of weeks of each other, where we can say the sort of English, German, Spanish, Italian, French window can close, and we can work around that. The sort of main leagues in Europe, sort of thing. It's just an absolute shambles every year, and who knows? You might get Dubravka through the door. You might get Johnson through the door, but until until they're done, they're not done, are they? So it looks like Broja will be coming through the door. And when you sort of heard that filter through the other night, you thought that is just, of all the sort of targets out there and all the players that we could have been chasing in that centre forward position, that sort of ticked the box. I know he's what, 3 goals in 3 seasons, and he's been dreadfully unlucky with injuries. I won't call him injury prone, because if you're picking up
Yeah.
ACLs and Achilles injuries, that's just bad luck.
Yeah.
If you're forever getting calf injuries and hamstring strains and this, that, and the other, you can call him injury prone. But he's had a run of bad luck, and I think the lad needs a club where he's going to be the main man. And having seen how he gave Tarky he gave him a run around, didn't he, at Southampton?
Yeah, torrid time, didn't he? Yeah.
I know it's going back sort of 4 years or so now, but that's the potential the lad's got, and I'm all for it. I think he can carry the ball. He's good in the air. He's a bit of pace. He's aggressive. So I think he fits the bill.
Yeah. And Daz, obviously, he was at Everton last year, and as Chris said, he's not a player who's picking up the same injury. You get these players where it's the same part of the body, and you kind of go, they're injury prone. They've got a glass ankle, or they've got, a glass hamstrings or whatever. But he looks to be a guy who, absolutely, Everton wanted him last year. He was a big target for them, and it didn't work out because of his injuries. He is the kind of player who, when, as Chris said, when it was announced, he kind of went, oh, you know what? I remember that spell at Southampton. I have to have a look to see what he's done since then. But do you see him as almost the kind of, I've seen a lot of people saying that almost Vokes-like character, where Vokes, he'd bounced around a load of clubs, never got any traction because he wasn't really getting a run of games. He was in and out of clubs. As soon as he comes to Burnley, he kind of gets that run of games, finds that form. Do you see Broja as one of those players that, if we can get over this bad luck with injuries and give him a run of games, actually he could be that player who dare I say it, that hidden gem that you've suddenly gone, bloody hell, nobody else is looking at him, perhaps because of his injury record?
Well, yeah, you have a list of targets, don't you? And Burnley will have had a list of targets in mind probably all summer long. And when you start narrowing that down, you rule out the £80 million signings and you rule out the ones that are £2 million, and you want somebody of a certain standard. He's an international footballer. Yes, he missed something like 150 days of last season through 2 injuries, one which was a freak injury where he picked up an ankle ligament injury, I think it was, in probably January, I think it was, in the FA Cup when Everton played Peterborough. And before then, he was building some momentum, Everton fans were warming to him. He's building some momentum. He's got a great touch. He runs the line well. He's a physical presence. He's got a lot going for him. But he's 23 years old. He's had a couple of injuries. We're rolling the dice a little bit. It's a gamble because at 23 years old with a couple of injuries behind him, and I know Chris said a few more unfortunate injuries, where does that sit in the whole scheme of things? Is he an injury-prone player, or has he just had a bit of bad luck for 12 months, and at 23 years old, his body will recover quickly, and he becomes an absolute monster for us? But that's where Burnley are. We want to sign a striker. We can't sign Evan Ferguson. We can't spend £80 million or £90 million on Akatike. We don't want to spend £2 or £3 million. We don't want another Foster on our hands. So your bandwidth is pretty narrow in terms of targets. And he probably, as Chris said, ticks a lot of the boxes in terms of price, in terms of ability, in terms of what he can give the team. I think it's probably a sensible risk. Is probably what it is. And good luck to the kid, because he needs, as Chris said, he needs a new home and he needs to sort of feel like he's wanted, feel like he's the number one. And I think he will be. He's a better than Foster in my eyes.
Yeah.
So, that's a step up. Any step up from Foster is a good move.
Yeah. And Chris, 2 things Daz touched on there. Ferguson, obviously, I think I got quite excited when I was linked with him, but, is he any less of a risk than Broja? He obviously came onto the scene for Brighton, but then really just has disappeared, got his move this summer. So that's the first point. We look at players who perhaps have a better, more recent profile, shall we say. So they've scored a few goals, more than Broja. And he's the other point that he needs a new home, somewhere where he's going to be number one. We kind of seen what Scott Parker's about, haven't we, over the course of the last 12 months in terms of the impact he can have on players. He had it on Marcus Edwards. He's had it on Jadon Anthony in terms of being able to put that arm around the shoulder, that almost human touch with these players, where at Chelsea, he's not getting that because he's one of, and I know we've got a big squad, but one of 60-odd players who, Maresca's probably not even, would barely recognise him in a corridor at Cobham. Do you see that as as the kind of lie of the land, if you will?
Well, it's probably a wider conversation, but it's a dying art, isn't it? Being a centre forward, and if you're looking down, you can look at all the big hitters, and United are desperate, and they're chasing Sesko, and people talk about Vlahovic at Juventus, who hasn't had a terrific time there, and beyond Isak, I think United seem to be toting Hoyland round. That's not worked, and Gyökeres, and you're either in that sort of 60, 80, 100 plus market, or you're, Delap's gone for 30 million, hasn't it, this summer?
Yeah.
You're taking a risk on a champ, but top scorer at Championship was Peru, wasn't it, at Leeds? Who he's not that type. Who is that sort of? Like I see, Wrexham are bringing Kiefer Moore in. He's he was in mid-30s now. That sort of the out and out centre forward type. Actually, I think he's a risk, but he's worth taking. I think I'd like to see another centre forward brought in. Must be said, but I just think Scott Parker's not daft. The medical team will have done their homework. All the tests will have made sure he's up to speed in that sense. They're not going to bring a crock in, and if he's passing his medical, that's I'm more than happy with that.
He failed the medical at Ipswich, which is where Everton got him, because he failed the medical at Ipswich, and that's where Everton stepped in and took him. And Everton, by the way, had an option to buy him this summer for £30 million. And I suppose that the fact they didn't take that up is a reflection of the games that he missed, because he missed quite a lot of games for them, and they probably had targets elsewhere, because when they had the £30 million sort of obligation, if you will, they had different ownership. New ownership comes into Everton. Now the targets are different because they've got a bit more money behind them. So he was rated a £30 million player 12 months ago. He's had two bad injuries. Well, sorry, one bad injury and an unfortunate Achilles injury last summer. But he's 23 years old. Come back to it. You know, this kid is young. His body will recover. He just needs to run of games, and hopefully he gets that.
But see, talking
Yeah.
about centre forwards, probably like Calvert-Lewin, if even if Broja was fit, wouldn't have got in the Everton side. But
Yeah.
Calvert-Lewin reportedly is wanting six figures a week apparently, and he's not got a club either. So there again, you're looking at this is what for someone who again would be a gamble for someone, and he's wanting in excess of 100 grand a week. It's just not
Yeah.
it's just not doable.
And you touched on it yourself, Chris, there, the options that are out there. Remember back to Steve Cottrell's day? Steve once said, every year it's kind of cyclical football. There becomes a shortage of a position. And it was fullback, I think, in his area. He was looking for a fullback who couldn't get one. He said, this year, there's no fullbacks out there. This year, it appears to me that there's a dearth of centre forwards, quality centre forwards, unless you want to pay £90-100 million. So you're fishing in a small pond.
Like say that the big hitters, like if they can't land a Gyökeres or Ekitike, you're talking about them dropping down to a Watkins and people like that. I mean, I like Watkins. I think he's
Yeah.
done ever so well. You know, created one of the magic moments watching England in my lifetime. But I don't think he's elite. And if you're talking about Manchester United, you know, he's not a Man United player in a million years, I don't think. But I've got high standards for United, and maybe they're not at that level anymore. But it's a tough position to fill. And we've you know you want a Chris Wood type, don't you? But again, how much would it cost to get Chris Wood out the door at Forest?
Yeah. But again, I mean, in terms of Chris, I mean, Chris Wood, lots of Burnley fans didn't rate him, did they? Yeah, he had this ridiculous record of getting into double figures in the Premier League for goodness knows how many seasons, cracking season last year. I mean, Daz, I made this point on Up the Clarets and, basically kind of replying to Tony Scholes. He basically said, look, I'm not bothered about his stats elsewhere. What I'm bothered about is what he does in a Burnley shirt. There is this obsession with, if a player does well, I think I've mentioned this before, if a player's scoring goals and great scoring records, as soon as he makes that move, that's just going to transfer. And I think of the two people I always think of is Rocky Santa Cruz, who had a brilliant season for
Yeah.
Blackburn Rovers and then dive bombed at Man City. And then the biggest one, Fernando Torres. Absolute world beater at Liverpool.
Shevchenko,
Horrid. Shevchenko,
Morientes.
Rata to a certain extent.
Crespo
There's
didn't have a
loads of
great
them.
time of it at Chelsea, did he? Yeah.
This is it. We can't. How much can we put on outside perhaps the top 2-3% of strikers in the world or players in the world? Your Messis are always going to perform. Your Ronaldos are always going to perform. But even at that elite level, I mean, Fernando Torres was one of the top strikers in the world. Had a torrid time at Chelsea. What they've done at previous clubs matters very little. It's all about the environment, isn't it, Daz, that they come into, and you've said, he needs a new home, he needs a new environment. That's got to be more important than what the Wikipedia page says or the YouTube hastily put together highlights reel shows, surely.
You've got to have some stats to back yourself up, but the kid is a proven goal scorer. In his past, he needs an arm around his shoulder. He needs to be shown that he's the number one at a football club, and the rest could take care of itself. He's going to plough a lone furrow at Burnley for many, many games. He's going to be running the line. He's going to be chasing down defenders down the lines. He's not going to have a lot of support. If he scores 10, 15 goals a season, he'll have done really well. Chris Wood, who was terrific for us and got double figures 3 seasons in a row, that's the standard we need. But we need someone who can score 10, 15 goals a season. If you want someone who's going to score 20 goals a season, you better start paying £80 million for it. And we haven't got that kind of money. So, let's shop in our marketplace. Let's see what we can do. And if we go down, we go down. It's, the odds are against us anyway. You've got two sides down who came up with us. Leeds are signing every 6'3" player in the world. Sunderland just signing every player in the world. And there's still probably going to be 3 of the bottom 4, maybe even 3 of the bottom 3. So all you can do is cut your cloth accordingly.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, 2 points. Sunderland, I believe, just lost their fourth pre-season game on the bounce. So that, albeit with, with Granit Xhaka in that side against Real Betis on Saturday. But I mean, if anybody comes in and gets 10 to 15 goals, that gives you a high percentage chance of staying up, doesn't it? I mean, that's the biggest thing really is trying to find somebody who's going to weigh in. Last season we didn't have many players, at that level. I know Fleming kind of got close to double figures, if not into double figures, and we had Brownhill. But you bring a player in who gets you 12 to 15 goals, and you're probably looking at a decent chance of staying up, aren't you?
Well, you still need the others to chip in as well. It's not just about him. I mean, you can stop up with, your main man scoring single figures as long as everyone else is chipping. Your centre halves are popping up, and whoever takes the set plays maybe and things like that. But I mean, you look at it. The years we've struggled and gone down. I mean, like Fletcher got 8 or 9 that season, which was a terrific effort, to be fair. And he turned out to be a very, very efficient at that level. Ings, what did Ingsy finish with? The Ingsy finished with single figures just about, I think, in 2014-15. It
9, I
wasn't
think, yeah.
until, like I say, you got Wood and Barnes firing between them that we were in clover sort of thing. So yeah, last time out it was like Brun Larson was it 7?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a massive help, but it's everyone else has got to chip in. We need our set plays to be. That's the one area where it's almost like leveled out across the board, hasn't it? If you're going to be, you don't have to be expansive in your football. You don't have to have pace. You don't have to have this, that, and the other. You just have to have good delivery and someone who can bloody attack the thing. And you've seen it. I know Arsenal's still waiting for a major pot, but the set plays have been devastating for a couple of seasons, and it's given them a bit of a leg up, hasn't it? Look at the corners and the centre halves going hunting them, or Rice's free kick delivery and things like that. It can make a huge difference. So we need to make a step up on that front as well.
Yeah, definitely. We'll just finish off by talking about something I think Woody kind of alluded to last week with a couple of digs, but the friendly against Lazio, which we're all very excited about. Even more exciting news is that if you can't come to Turf Moor, then it will be the first time in the world ever that you can watch a virtual reality version of Burnley versus Lazio using a VR headset. Now, to coin a phrase that our esteemed colleague Justin Connolly uses, I don't think it's meant for us, is it, chaps? But Daz, the thought of watching a computerization of the friendly might not be our cup of tea, but it's a step again, isn't it, in terms of increasing the brand and getting into perhaps a market which is into esports and things like that.
It'll be interesting to see who watches it, because the chances are, I'm going to roll the dice here, the chances are if you want to watch Burnley v Lazio, you're at Burnley v Lazio. So I don't expect the audience to be great for this, but it's an experiment. It's and this is Alan Pace all over, isn't it? Alan likes to push boundaries in this respect, the partnerships with people, and this is just another one of those. Where it goes, I don't know. I mean, I must admit, as you said, it's not for us, Andrew. I won't be tuning in. I'm not going to watch a crap FIFA. I'll probably be tied up that afternoon anyway, because I am at the Everton-Roma game, so I'll be missing the Burnley-Lazio game, so I'm covering the Everton game. So, but yeah, it's an experiment, and they'll get a tiny audience. What we really need is Woody to don his headset and report back, because I imagine there'll be a few fucks and a few shits in there.
Yeah, I mean, Woody has got a headset, a Meta headset, hanging around. I mean, Chris, you're quite tech savvy. You're probably the most kind of tech savvy with your lovely wireless headphones like a footballer. Would you ever be tempted to watch a computerized version? So this is the thing. It's by a Manchester company called Rizil, a couple of Manc lads who've got this company. Some stunning technology that they're using. We have to say they do use it for training purposes and various other things. But would you ever be tempted to don a headset for a match that you couldn't get to, if it was the difference between being able to see the action in real life, proper graphics or proper video, and being able to see the game, albeit a virtual reality version of it?
I'm all for innovation. I think it can't be sniffed at basically. And if Burnley are looking, they're breaking new ground, which is good. It's good to see. It is probably for that sort of younger generation who are really used to they're playing FIFA on loop, aren't they? And they're always online, and they're sort of probably more used to seeing their football in that sort of medium, really. And I've no qualms with it. It's if someone said to me you needed a Meta Quest headset or whatever it is, it makes you sound like you were playing Dungeons and Dragons or something. It's not my. It's all a bit nerdy for me, but no, I quite like it. There's no harm in looking at alternative means and avenues to spread the brand, to get the name of Burnley out there, and to enable more people to get eyes on the game in whatever format. I mean, bloody hell! Like, how many of us spent Saturdays glued to CFAX
Yeah,
on a
very
Saturday
true.
afternoon? Well, but watching Burnley go 3-0 down again at bloody Maidstone and Gillingham, or it was them away games you didn't always get to in the past, and whichever way you can get your fix, that's fine with me.
They might have
Yeah.
half a million.
Just looking at some of the.
They might have 500,000 Romans wearing it. That might be it. Rather than travelling, get your VR headset. Cheaper than buying a flight over here, and so get your VR headset on back in Rome.
Oh.
Get them all sat in the Colosseum. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? That'd be fantastic. According to the official blurb, key features include a virtual seat inside Turf Moor with full panoramic pitch view, live match commentary, I presume from Phil Bird, and real-time visuals including player kits and club branding, a single-user VR environment designed for focused, uninterrupted viewing, and it's free to access via the Meta Quest store. Apparently, no subscription, no paywall. So
you got a VR Pi as well.
Yeah, that would be quite good.
It'd still be
cold.
cold.
You get the sights and the smells of the toilets. It burnt all around the outside, but freezing in the middle. Yeah, that's the full
these
proper
headsets,
experience.
by the way, these headsets, we had them at Everton because we they trialled the premium places and sold the premium spots for fans based on these headsets, because of course you're trying to sell 5,000, 6,000 premium spaces, but you don't have a stadium to show them in. So these headsets, we use them quite a lot to show people where their seat would be in the stadium. I have to say, when you put these headsets on in a static environment, looking around that stadium where you could literally sit in your seat and look around, it was incredible. When you start putting avatars on the pitch, or whatever you want to call them, and players, and how that motion works, that's the big question. The demo they put out didn't look the clearest and cleanest, but let's see how it works.
Yeah, definitely. I realise that last 10 minutes just makes us all sound like Luddites, but like I say, it's not for us. It's not for us, as JC would say. So, but if that is your cup of tea, then there is more details on the club's website, burnleyfc.com. It is free as well. So, if you're not going to the Lazio game and you've got one of these headsets lying around because you're one of these people, a bit like Woody, I think, who went out and purchased them thinking it'd be the future of civilization and it's now gathering dust, then dust it off, give it a try, because like I say, I think the technology itself is fantastic. Rizil, who is the Manchester-based company, obviously working quite hard on that. So, but yeah, there we go. That's it for this episode. Hope you have a good week. We will be back later in the week, hopefully with a couple of signings, Broja confirmed, and an other or two ahead of that game against Lazio. Until then, though, enjoy your week and up the Clarets.